I never believed in fate until the day my purse slipped from my fingers at Bellucci's restaurant. The sound of my few remaining coins scattering across the polished marble floor might as well have been thunder in the hushed dining room. Heads turned, eyes locked on me, and I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment. After a 16-hour shift at the clinic, my fingers had simply lost their strength. All I'd wanted was to pick up dinner and collapse in my apartment. "I'm so sorry," I whispered to no one in particular as I dropped to my knees, frantically gathering my belongings. Lip balm, keys, wallet, a half-eaten granola bar, all the mundane artifacts of my exhausted life. That's when the restaurant's atmosphere shifted. The ambient chatter died, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against my skin. I glanced up, confused by the sudden change, and saw the staff straightening their postures, eyes averted downward in respect. Or was it fear? A pair of immaculate black Oxfords stopped inches from my fingertips. The leather looked butter-soft, custom-made, probably worth 3 months of my rent. My gaze traveled upward, tailored charcoal pants with a perfect crease, a suit jacket that draped like liquid over broad shoulders, and finally, a face that made my breath catch. He couldn't have been more than 35, with features that belonged on a Renaissance painting, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes so intensely blue they seemed to cut right through me. But it wasn't his devastating good looks that made me freeze. It was the cold authority radiating from him, the silent command in his posture that had quieted an entire restaurant. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits, their expressions blank, eyes constantly scanning the room. One had a hand perpetually near his jacket, in position to reach for something I didn't want to consider. I realized I'd been staring and quickly looked down, resuming my humiliating scavenge. "Allow me," he said, his voice deep and accented. Italian, but refined by American education. Before I could protest, he crouched down beside me, his movements graceful despite his imposing frame. The restaurant seemed to collectively hold its breath. I caught the manager's wide-eyed stare from across the room, his face drained of color. "Thank you, but I've got it," I mumbled, desperately trying to gather my things faster. He ignored me, picking up my Metro card and a receipt. Then his hand froze over something that had slid partially beneath a nearby table. My ultrasound photo, the one I'd been carrying around for 3 weeks, unable to process what it meant for my future. His fingers closed around the black and white image, and he turned it over slowly, studying the grainy profile of the 12-week-old fetus, my baby, and the name printed in the corner, Emma Reynolds. "Yours?" he asked, voice soft, but somehow still commanding. I nodded, unable to form words, reaching for the photo. But he didn't immediately hand it back, his eyes lingering on the image with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You're having a child, not a question, an assessment." "Yes." I finally found my voice. "Now, if you don't mind..." His eyes met mine again, searching, assessing. "You're alone." The blunt observation stung, especially coming from a stranger. I snatched the ultrasound from his fingers. "I'm managing just fine, thank you." Something in his expression changed. A flicker of respect, perhaps, or amusement at my defiance. Most people, I sensed, didn't talk back to this man. "Luca Vitiello," he introduced himself, standing and offering me his hand. The action was so unexpectedly formal that I took it without thinking. His palm was warm, grip firm, and I felt calluses that contradicted his polished appearance. "Emma," I replied, then immediately regretted giving him my name. "Emma," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "Are you waiting for someone?" "No, I was just picking up dinner to go." I clutched my now-closed purse against my chest like armor. "You've had a long day." Another assessment, not a question. I glanced down at my wrinkled scrubs partially hidden under my coat. "I'm a nurse. 16-hour shift." Something passed through his eyes, and still no time to eat properly. He glanced at my takeout bag, a simple pasta dish, the cheapest thing on the menu. Before I could respond, he turned to the restaurant manager, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Marco, prepare a proper meal for Ms. Reynolds, something substantial, and a table in the private room, Mr. Vitiello." "That's not necessary." I started to protest. "A pregnant woman needs proper nutrition." he stated with such finality that I felt momentarily speechless, especially one working 16-hour shifts. The manager, Marco, was already hurrying away, relief evident in his expression at having been given a clear directive. I stood my ground, though every instinct told me to leave immediately. I appreciate the gesture, but I really need to get home. I'm exhausted. Luca studied me for a moment, then nodded. Of course. Then allow me to have it delivered. That's really not... I insist. The words were polite, but his tone made it clear he wasn't accustomed to being refused. His eyes softened marginally. Please. It would be my pleasure. Something told me this man didn't say please very often. I hesitated, weighing my desperate need for sleep against my equally desperate need for a decent meal. My pregnancy had left me constantly hungry, and the pasta I'd ordered wouldn't be enough. Fine, I conceded. Thank you. A slight smile touched his lips, just enough to transform his severe features into something dangerously attractive. He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward immediately. This is Dominic. He'll see you safely home and ensure your dinner arrives promptly. My eyes widened. That's completely unnecessary. I just live a few blocks away. A few blocks can be a long distance in this city, especially at night. His gaze fell briefly to my midsection, then back to my face. Humor me, Emma. The way he said my name, like he had some claim to it, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I wanted to refuse, to maintain some boundary with this overwhelming stranger, but exhaustion was clouding my judgment, and something in me recognized that arguing would be futile. I nodded reluctantly. Your address? He asked. I hesitated, then provided it. He repeated it to Dominic, who memorized it without writing anything down. The car is waiting, Ms. Reynolds, Dominic said, his voice professionally neutral. Car? I told you it's just a few blocks. Emma. Luca's voice had a gentle warning in it. Accept the ride. I was too tired to fight anymore. Fine. Thank you. As I turned to leave, Luca reached out, his fingers just barely brushing my arm. The contact, even through my coat, felt electric. Take better care of yourself, he said quietly. Both of you. I couldn't formulate a response. I simply nodded and followed Dominic out of the restaurant. The black SUV waiting at the curb had tinted windows, and I noticed as Dominic opened the door for me, was lined with butter-soft leather. As we pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Luca watching from the restaurant entrance, his expression unreadable. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't a chance encounter. Nothing about Luca Vitiello happened by chance. My apartment felt especially small and shabby after the opulence of that brief encounter. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto my sofa, trying to process what had just happened. The man's presence had been so commanding, so absolute, that only now, in his absence, could I think clearly. I pulled the ultrasound photo from my purse and stared at it. My baby. The result of a relationship that had ended badly when Jason discovered I was pregnant. He'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me or the child, leaving me alone to navigate this terrifying new reality. A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Dominic holding several large bags. Your dinner, Ms. Reynolds, he said when I opened the door. Mr. Vitiello took the liberty of ordering a selection, as he wasn't certain of your preferences. I accepted the bags, stunned by their weight. This is too much. Mr. Vitiello's instructions were clear. Is there anything else you require? No, thank you. Please thank Mr. Vitiello for me. Dominic nodded and turned to leave, but paused. Mr. Vitiello rarely involves himself in others' affairs. Consider that a compliment. Without further explanation, he disappeared down the hallway. Inside the bags, I discovered not just dinner but enough food for several days. Pasta dishes, roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, fresh bread, and even desserts, all packaged in containers that were far nicer than anything I owned. Tucked into one of the bags was a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Proper nutrition is essential. My number, should you need anything. LV below was a phone number, written in strong, confident strokes. I set the note aside, telling myself I would never use it. Yet I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. As I ate the most delicious meal I'd had in months, I convinced myself this strange encounter was over. A bizarre moment of kindness from a wealthy stranger, nothing more. I was wrong. The following morning, Exhaustion still weighed on me despite a full night's sleep. Pregnancy was taking a greater toll than I'd anticipated. I arrived at North Shore Medical Center for my shift and headed straight to the staff room to deposit my things before rounds. "Emma?" Sandra, the charge nurse, caught me at the door. "You've been reassigned." I blinked at her. "What? Why?" "Orders from administration. You're being moved to the private wing." The private wing was reserved for wealthy patients or those requiring extra security. As a general medical nurse, I rarely had cause to work there. But I don't have privileges for that wing. You do now. Sandra handed me a new ID badge. Effective immediately, your patient load has also been reduced to account for your condition. My hand instinctively went to my stomach. My condition. I haven't even told HR yet. Sandra looked uncomfortable. Apparently someone did. Look, don't question it. Reduced hours, same pay, and you'll be working with only one patient. Most of us would kill for that assignment. My mind raced. There was only one explanation, but it seemed impossible. Who authorized this? The board, apparently, after a substantial donation earmarked specifically for maternal staff welfare. Sandra checked her watch. You should get up there. Room 801. Your patient is already waiting. Dread pooled in my stomach as I took the elevator to the 8th floor. The private wing was noticeably different from the rest of the hospital, quieter, with higher-end finishes and art on the walls. I approached the nurses' station, where an unfamiliar charge nurse greeted me. "Emma Reynolds, we've been expecting you. Mr. Russo is in 801. He's recovering from a minor procedure and primarily needs monitoring. His associates have specific instructions about his care." I nodded numbly and made my way to room 801. Outside the door stood a man in a dark suit, unmistakably similar to those who had accompanied Luca Vitiello. He assessed me briefly, then stepped aside to let me pass. The room was more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Sitting up in bed was an older Italian man, perhaps in his 60s, with silver hair and familiar blue eyes. "Ah, you must be Emma," he said warmly. "My son spoke very highly of you." "Your son?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Luca. He insisted you be assigned to my care." The older man extended his hand. "Antonio Vitiello. A pleasure to meet the young lady who made such an impression on my boy." He's not easily impressed. I shook his hand automatically, my mind reeling. "Mr. Vitiello, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I only met your son briefly last night." Antonio chuckled. "Sometimes a brief encounter is all it takes. Luca said you're expecting." "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied stiffly, trying to maintain professionalism despite my growing unease. "I should check your vitals." As I worked, Antonio chatted amiably about his family, his businesses, all described vaguely as imports, and his pride in his son. I responded with professional courtesy while my mind raced with questions. How had Luca managed to have me reassigned so quickly? What kind of influence did this family have? I finished my assessment and updated his chart. "Everything looks good, Mr. Vitiello. Is there anything you need before I go?" "Just one thing," he said, his expression turning serious. "My son is a complicated man with significant responsibilities. When he takes an interest in something, or someone, it's never casual." "Mr. Vitiello, I appreciate your concern, but there's really nothing between your son and me. We literally just met." He smiled knowingly. "Of course. I'm simply providing context for what might come next." He settled back against his pillows. "You'll be taking care of me for the next few days. We'll have plenty of time to get acquainted." As I left the room, the guard outside nodded to me with a new respect that made my skin crawl. I hurried to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, trying to catch my breath. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "I trust my father is in good hands." I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. I hadn't given Luca Vitiello my number. "How did you get this number?" I typed back. The reply came almost instantly. "I have resources, Emma. How are you feeling today? Better rested, I hope." I leaned against the wall, torn between outrage at the invasion of privacy and an unsettling fascination. "What did you do? How am I suddenly assigned to your father?" I merely made a suggestion that aligned with the hospital's interests. You needed reduced hours. My father needed competent care. A mutually beneficial arrangement. You had no right to interfere in my job. There was a longer pause before his response. Perhaps not. But I protect what interests me. The implication made my heart race. I didn't respond, unsure what to say. Another message appeared. Have dinner with me tomorrow, 7 p.m. I'll send a car. Not a request. An expectation. I typed back. I don't even know you. That's the purpose of dinner, Emma, to change that. I stared at my phone, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct told me to refuse, to establish a boundary with this overwhelming man who had inserted himself into my life without permission. But another part of me, a part I didn't fully understand, was curious, drawn to the intensity of his interest, the decisiveness of his actions. One dinner, I finally replied. And then you stop interfering in my job. His response was immediate. Agreed. Until tomorrow, Emma. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, uncertain if I had just made a terrible mistake. The baby fluttered inside me, too early for a real kick, but a reminder nonetheless of my responsibility to protect not just myself, but the life growing within me. What kind of man was Luca Vitiello, really? And why had he fixated on me, a pregnant, struggling nurse with nothing to offer someone of his obvious wealth and power? I didn't have answers yet. But something told me I would soon discover exactly what happened when you caught the attention of a man like Luca Vitiello. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of vital signs, medication rounds, and Antonio Vitiello's surprisingly charming conversation. I learned he had emigrated from Sicily as a young man, built an import business from nothing, and raised Luca largely on his own after his wife died of cancer when Luca was 12. I tried to maintain professional distance, but Antonio's warmth made it difficult. My Luca, he said as I checked his IV, he had to become a man too quickly. Responsibility shapes a boy differently than freedom does. I made a non-committal sound, unwilling to engage in more discussion about the man who had so abruptly inserted himself into my life. He told me about your condition, Antonio continued, his eyes drifting to my midsection. A child is a blessing, the greatest one. Yes, I agreed quietly. Though the timing isn't ideal, Antonio waved his hand dismissively. Timing is never ideal. Life happens as it should. When my shift ended, I half expected to find Dominic waiting to escort me home. Instead, I walked out of the hospital unaccompanied, feeling both relieved and, irrationally, a little disappointed. That night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, one hand resting on my barely there bump. What do you think, little one? Is your mom making terrible decisions? No answer came, of course, just the distant sounds of the city and my own conflicted thoughts. The following evening, anxiety twisted in my stomach as I tried on outfit after outfit. Nothing seemed right, everything either too casual or trying too hard. I finally settled on a simple navy blue dress that skimmed over my figure, hiding the small swell of my pregnancy while still looking appropriate for dinner. At precisely 6:45, my phone buzzed with a text. The car is waiting downstairs. I took a deep breath, checking my reflection one last time. Just dinner, I told myself. One dinner and then boundaries. The same black SUV from before waited at the curb. Dominic opened the door as I approached. Good evening, Ms. Reynolds. Hello, Dominic, I replied, attempting to sound casual despite the surreal circumstances. The drive took us to Manhattan's Upper East Side, stopping in front of a brownstone with no visible signage. Only a discreet brass plaque reading Privato suggested it was a business at all. Dominic escorted me to the door, which opened before we reached it. Inside, the space was intimate and elegant. Only about 10 tables, most unoccupied, with warm lighting and tasteful decor. Mr. Vitiello is waiting, the maitre d' said, leading us through the restaurant to a secluded alcove in the back. Luca rose as we approached. He wore another impeccable suit, this one a deep navy that made his eyes even more striking. For a moment, I forgot my reservations as those eyes locked with mine, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. Emma, he greeted, stepping forward to pull out my chair. You look beautiful. Thank you, I managed, taking my seat. This place is exclusive. I own it. he said matter-of-factly. It ensures privacy. Of course he did. I watched as Dominic took up position near the entrance to our alcove, effectively blocking anyone from approaching. Is he always with you? I asked, nodding toward Dominic. Security is a necessary precaution in my position. Luca poured wine into his glass from a decanter, then reached for a separate carafe. Sparkling water with lemon for you. Unless you prefer something else. The thoughtfulness of remembering my pregnancy caught me off guard. No, that's perfect. Thank you. A waiter appeared with appetizers I hadn't seen anyone order. Luca must have arranged the entire meal in advance. You're very presumptuous, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He raised an eyebrow. Efficient. There's a difference. Is there? You reassigned me at work without asking. You somehow got my phone number. You arranged this entire evening without consulting me on anything but the date. And yet you're here, he observed quietly. I flushed, because he was right. Despite everything, I had come willingly. I'm curious, I admitted. And I want to understand why you've taken such an interest in me. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable, direct. I appreciate that. He took a sip of his wine. The simple answer is that I found you compelling. The more complex answer will take time. I'm not sure we have time. I agreed to one dinner. A slight smile curved his lips. We'll see. The appetizers were delicious. Fresh burrata with heirloom tomatoes, arancini with truffle, and thinly sliced prosciutto that melted on my tongue. Despite my determination to remain aloof, I couldn't help the small sound of pleasure that escaped me. Luca watched me eat with evident satisfaction. You enjoy food. Who doesn't? I countered. Many people eat without truly tasting. He leaned forward slightly. You experience things fully. It's rare. I set down my fork, unsettled by his observation. Tell me what you do, Luca. Your father mentioned an import business. Among other ventures, real estate, restaurants, private security. His eyes never left mine. My family has diverse interests. And which of those interests requires Dominic and his friends to follow you everywhere? All of them, he replied smoothly. Success attracts attention, not all of it welcome. I didn't believe him, not entirely, but I let it pass. And why does a successful businessman with diverse interests take such a sudden interest in a pregnant nurse? His expression softened marginally. Because that nurse showed more strength and independence in 5 minutes than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. The compliment caught me off guard. I was just picking up my purse. You were working a 16-hour shift while pregnant, living alone, and still maintaining your dignity despite obvious exhaustion. And when someone most people find intimidating, offered help, you pushed back. He leaned forward. Do you know how rare that is in my world, Emma? Authenticity. Strength without agenda? I swallowed, uncomfortable with his intensity. You don't know anything about me. I know enough to want more. His bluntness was disarming. Tell me about the baby's father. The abrupt change of subject felt like a physical jolt. That's very personal. Yes, he agreed, unapologetic. I considered refusing to answer. But something, perhaps the genuine interest in his eyes, made me respond. His name is Jason. We dated for 8 months. When I told him about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father and left. I kept my tone matter of fact, though the memory still stung. Luca's expression hardened. He abandoned his responsibility. He made his choice. A coward's choice. Luca's voice had turned cold. And now you work impossible hours to support yourself and your child alone. I lifted my chin. I'm managing. At what cost? Exhaustion? Your health? Your baby's health? He shook his head. Stubborn independence isn't always strength, Emma. Sometimes it's pride. And sometimes help comes with strings, I countered. His eyes locked with mine. What strings do you imagine I've attached? I held his gaze. I don't know yet. That's what concerns me. For the first time he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features. Smart woman. The main courses arrived then, a delicate sea bass for me and osso buco for him. We ate in silence for a few moments, the tension between us shifting to something less confrontational, but no less potent. The hospital administrator was quite receptive to my donation, Luca said eventually. especially when I explained my interest in supporting healthcare workers during pregnancy. Is that what you told them? That it was about maternal welfare? It was the truth. He set down his fork. My mother worked through her pregnancy with me. Too hard, too long. There were complications. A shadow crossed his face. Your situation reminded me of hers. The personal revelation surprised me. I'm sorry. He waved off my sympathy. Ancient history. But perhaps you understand my reaction better now. I did, though I wasn't ready to admit it. It still wasn't your place. Perhaps not. He conceded with a slight nod, but I've never been good at watching problems I could solve. I'm not a problem to be solved, Luca. His eyes softened. No, you're not. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine briefly. You're a remarkable woman making the best of difficult circumstances. I simply want to ease those circumstances. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. For a moment, I could almost forget the commanding presence, the obvious wealth and power, and see just a man expressing genuine concern. Why? I asked quietly. Because you and your child deserve better than struggle. He held my gaze. And because I find myself unable to stop thinking about you. My heart stuttered. Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang in my purse. The hospital's ringtone. I should take this, I said, grateful for the interruption. I'm on call. He nodded, leaning back to give me privacy. Emma Reynolds, I answered. Emma, it's Sandra. I know you're off tonight, but we have a situation with Mr. Vitiello. His fever has spiked, and he's asking for you specifically. I glanced up at Luca, who was watching me intently. I'll be right there. Start the protocol for infection, and I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up and found Luca already standing. My father? He asked, tension evident in his posture. His fever has spiked. It could be nothing, a minor infection at the surgical site. But they're concerned. Luca nodded once, his expression shifting to something harder, more controlled. We'll go immediately. Within moments, we were in the SUV, speeding toward the hospital. Luca was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone. Though I couldn't understand the words, the commanding tone needed no translation. I've arranged for a specialist, he said after ending the call. He'll meet us there. The hospital has excellent doctors, I assured him. I take no chances with family. His voice was clipped, his earlier warmth replaced by cool efficiency. When we arrived at the hospital, Luca moved with purpose, his hand at the small of my back guiding me through corridors with the confidence of someone who owned the building. Security guards and staff alike moved out of our way, some with looks of recognition or deference. Antonio's room was a hub of activity. Nurses, a doctor I recognized as the head of surgery, and 2 men in suits standing tensely by the wall. Father, Luca said, immediately moving to Antonio's bedside. Antonio looked pale but alert. Luca, Emma. I told them not to disturb your evening. Don't be ridiculous, I said, slipping into nurse mode and checking his chart. His temperature was 102.3. Definitely concerning. The doctor approached Luca. Mr. Vitiello, we've started broad-spectrum antibiotics. There appears to be an infection at the incision site. Not uncommon, but given your father's age, we are monitoring closely. Luca nodded curtly. Dr. Rossi will be here within the hour. I want him to review everything. If the hospital doctor was offended by the implication that they needed outside help, he didn't show it. Of course. I moved to check Antonio's vitals myself, needing to do something useful. How are you feeling? Like I'm causing too much fuss, Antonio replied, though his voice was weaker than earlier. You should return to your dinner. My son rarely takes an evening off. I'm exactly where I need to be, I assured him, checking his IV line. When I glanced up, I found Luca watching me, his expression unreadable. For the next hour, I worked alongside the hospital staff, monitoring Antonio's condition, while Luca held quiet conferences with various doctors and made occasional phone calls. When Dr. Rossi arrived, a distinguished-looking Italian man in his 60s, he conferred briefly with Luca before examining Antonio thoroughly. The infection is responding to treatment, he announced finally. The fever should break by morning. I'll stay to monitor progress. The tension in Luca's shoulders eased fractionally. He nodded to Dr. Rossi, then turned to me. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to be working tonight." "I'm fine," I assured him. "Stubborn," he murmured, but there was warmth in his eyes. "At least sit down." I realized I had been standing for over an hour, and reluctantly took the chair he offered. As the crisis subsided and Antonio drifted into sleep, the room gradually emptied until only Luca, his 2 guards, and I remained. "You don't have to stay," Luca said, his voice low in the quiet room. "Dominic can take you home." "I'll stay a while longer," I replied, surprising myself. "To monitor his vitals." Luca studied me for a moment, then nodded. He moved a chair beside mine and sat, our shoulders nearly touching in the dim light. "Thank you," he said simply. We sat in silence, watching Antonio's chest rise and fall, the monitors beeping steadily. I felt myself growing drowsy, the long day catching up with me. Without thinking, I leaned slightly against Luca's solid shoulder. He stiffened momentarily, then relaxed, his arm coming around to support me. "Rest," he murmured. "I've got you." As I drifted into sleep, I wondered hazily what I was doing, finding comfort in the arms of a man I barely knew, a man who clearly lived in a world very different from mine. Yet in that moment, it felt right. What I didn't know then was how completely our worlds were about to collide. I woke to gentle fingers brushing hair from my face. Disoriented, I blinked against the soft morning light filtering through hospital blinds. I was stretched awkwardly across a chair, my head resting on something firm yet comfortable. Luca's shoulder. His suit jacket draped over me like a blanket. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low rumble I could feel through his chest. I straightened quickly, embarrassment flooding me as I realized I'd slept against him all night. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." His hand lingered near my face before dropping. "You needed rest," my back protested as I stood, and I winced. Hospital chairs weren't designed for sleeping. "How's your father?" I asked, looking toward the bed where Antonio still slept. "Much improved. Fever broke around 3, Luca stretched, rolling his shoulders. Despite spending the night in a chair, he somehow looked immaculate. His shirt barely wrinkled, his presence commanding even in the sterile hospital room. "You should have woken me," I said, smoothing my hopelessly wrinkled dress. "I could have checked his vitals. The staff handled it." "You were exhausted." His eyes searched my face. "How do you feel?" I placed a hand on my stomach instinctively. "We're fine. Just a little stiff." A nurse entered with Antonio's morning medication. "Ms. Reynolds?" "I didn't realize you were here all night." "I didn't intend to be," I admitted, accepting the glass of water she offered. "You're not scheduled until this afternoon. Go home. Get some proper rest." "She's right," Luca said, standing. "I'll take you home." I wanted to argue, to maintain some professional boundary, but exhaustion won out. "Let me just check on Antonio first." As if hearing his name, Antonio stirred and opened his eyes. "Ah, the 2 of you are still here," he smiled weakly. "What a comfort to wake to family." I flushed at the implication. "Just doing my job, Mr. Vidiello." "Antonio, please. After sharing a vigil, I think we can dispense with formalities." His eyes, so like his son's, twinkled with mischief despite his weakened state. I checked his vitals, pleased to find his temperature normal and his color much improved. "You're doing much better. The antibiotics are working." "Of course they are. I'm too stubborn to let a little infection win." He patted my hand. "Now go home. You look exhausted, Cara." I glanced at Luca, who was watching our interaction with an unreadable expression. "Your son was just offering to drive me." "Good boy," Antonio approved. "Always taking care of things." Luca's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "I'll return shortly, Father." Antonio waved us away. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." The drive to my apartment was quiet. I leaned my head against the window, watching the city scroll by and trying to process the last 24 hours. "You're thinking very loudly," Luca observed as we neared my neighborhood. I turned to look at him. "This is all very strange for me." "What part specifically?" He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "Meeting you, your interest in me, spending the night in a hospital room with you watching over your father, all of it." I shook my head. I don't understand what you want from me. The car stopped in front of my building. Luca turned to face me, his expression serious. I want to know you, Emma. Beyond that, I'm not placing expectations. People like you always have expectations, I countered. A flash of something, amusement, admiration, crossed his face. People like me? Powerful, wealthy, used to getting their way. He considered this. Fair assessment. But I believe relationships should be built, not dictated. Is that what this is? A relationship? It's something, he said simply. Something worth exploring. I should have said no. Should have thanked him for the ride and walked away. Instead, I found myself asking, would you like to come up for coffee? The invitation surprised us both. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. I'd like that. My apartment felt even smaller with Luca in it, his presence somehow filling the space completely. I watched him take in my humble surroundings. The secondhand furniture, the medical textbooks stacked on the coffee table, the small kitchen with its aging appliances. No judgment crossed his face, only curiosity. He moved to a small collection of framed photos on my bookshelf. Your family? He asked, studying a picture of me with an older woman. My mom, I confirmed, moving to the kitchen to start the coffee. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. He picked up another photo, me in scrubs, arm around a classmate on graduation day. Nursing school? Yes, top of my class if you can believe it. I measured coffee into the filter. Mom got to see me graduate at least. And your father? Left when I was 4. Never knew him. I kept my voice deliberately casual. It was just Mom and me. He nodded, still studying the photos. So independence was necessary, not just preferred. His perceptiveness was unsettling. Something like that. The coffee maker burbled as I retrieved mugs from the cabinet. I don't have anything fancy, just regular coffee. Regular coffee is fine. He joined me in the kitchen, standing closer than necessary. You don't need to be nervous around me, Emma. I'm not nervous, I lied, very aware of his proximity in the small space, just tired. He reached out, his fingers gently touching the dark circle under my eye. You need proper rest, especially now. The tenderness in the gesture made my breath catch. For a moment, we stood frozen, his fingers against my cheek, my eyes locked with his. The coffee maker beeped, breaking the spell. I stepped back, busying myself with pouring the coffee. Milk? Sugar? I asked, my voice slightly unsteady. Black is fine. I handed him a mug, careful not to let our fingers touch. We moved to my small living room, sitting at opposite ends of the sofa. You said you wanted to know me, I began after a sip of coffee. What exactly do you want to know? Everything, he replied simply. But let's start with what you love. The question caught me off guard. What I love. Yes. Beyond work. What brings you joy? I thought for a moment. Books. I read everything I can get my hands on. And music. I played piano as a kid, though I haven't in years. I like to cook when I have the energy. I shrugged. Simple things, I guess. Simple pleasures are often the truest. He set his mug down. What are you reading now? I reached for the novel on my coffee table. Just a mystery, nothing profound. Do you always diminish your interests? There was no judgment in his tone, just curiosity. I frowned. What do you mean? Just a mystery, nothing profound, as if enjoying something requires justification. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. I suppose I do that sometimes. Don't, he said simply. Your joy needs no defense. We talked for over an hour, about books, about his travels, about my studies and his business ventures. He was surprisingly well-read, with opinions on everything from Russian literature to modern thrillers. When I mentioned loving to cook Italian food, he offered to have ingredients delivered for a proper carbonara. You can't just have things delivered on a whim, I protested. Why not? He seemed genuinely puzzled, because normal people don't live that way. A smile touched his lips. Perhaps you should try it sometime. As we talked, I found myself relaxing. even laughing at his dry observations about American customs that still confused him despite years in the country. It was easy to forget who he was. The commanding presence that silenced rooms, the man with bodyguards and mysterious business interests. Until his phone rang, the transformation was immediate. His expression shuddered, his posture straightened, and when he answered, his voice was cold, controlled, and entirely in Italian. I watched as he paced my small living room, power radiating from him even as he kept his voice low. Though I couldn't understand the words, the authority in his tone needed no translation. This was Luca Vitiello in his element. Commanding, uncompromising. When he hung up, he turned to me with regret in his eyes. I need to go. Business that can't wait, of course. I stood, suddenly aware again of the vast differences between us. He moved toward me, stopping closer than strictly necessary. I enjoyed this, Emma. Very much. So did I admitted. Have dinner with me again. Tomorrow night? I hesitated. I work until 7. 8 o'clock then. I'll send a car. I should have declined. Should have established boundaries. Instead, I nodded. Okay. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He stepped closer still, his hand rising to cut my cheek. The touch was feather-light, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, the barest whisper of a kiss, so gentle it might have been imagined. Then he stepped back, his eyes never leaving mine. Until tomorrow, he said softly, then turned and left. I stood frozen, fingers touching my lips where the ghost of his kiss still lingered. What was I doing? Later that day, a delivery arrived. Groceries of the highest quality, handmade pasta, pancetta, Parmigiano Reggiano, organic eggs, and a bottle of olive oil that probably cost more than all my kitchen supplies combined. A handwritten note accompanied them. For your carbonara. Enjoy something beautiful for yourself. L. I smiled despite myself, running my fingers over the elegant script. The gesture was thoughtful, personal in a way I hadn't expected. As I prepared the simple but luxurious meal that evening, I found myself wondering about Luca Vitiello, the commanding businessman with guards and mysterious phone calls, the attentive son who spent the night in a hospital chair, the man who listened intently to my opinions on mystery novels as if they mattered. Which version was real? The carbonara was delicious, rich and silky, the quality of the ingredients elevating the simple dish to something spectacular. As I savored each bite, I admitted to myself that I was looking forward to seeing him again, but the thought was immediately followed by anxiety. What was I thinking? Getting involved with someone like Luca. I was pregnant, alone, focused on building a stable life for my child. He was something else entirely, something I didn't fully understand. My phone chimed with a text. How was the carbonara? I smiled, typing back. Delicious. Thank you for the ingredients. My pleasure. Rest well, Emma. Tomorrow will be a long day for you. I frowned at the message. How did he know my schedule? Before I could respond, another text arrived. Don't worry. I merely asked what time your shift ended. No other intrusion. The fact that he anticipated my concern was both comforting and unsettling. I set my phone aside without replying, unsure what to make of his ability to read me so easily. That night, I dreamed of blue eyes and gentle hands, of whispered Italian words I couldn't understand, but somehow felt in my bones. I woke clutching my pillow, an ache of longing in my chest that frightened me with its intensity. This is crazy, I told my reflection as I got ready for work. You barely know him, but the truth was, I wanted to know more. Wanted to understand the complexities behind those piercing blue eyes, the gentleness that occasionally softened his commanding presence. At the hospital, Antonio greeted me with a knowing smile. You look better rested today, Cara. I am, thank you. I checked his vitals, pleased with his continued improvement. My son is quite taken with you, he said casually as I recorded his blood pressure. I kept my expression neutral. Mr. Vitiello. Antonio, he corrected. Antonio, I conceded. Your son and I barely know each other. Knowledge comes with time. Connection is immediate or not at all. He patted my hand. Luca doesn't extend himself to many people. It means something. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I continued my assessment in silence. He told me about the baby's father, Antonio said after a moment. What kind of man abandons his child? I tensed. That's really not. Family is everything, Emma, everything. His voice had taken on an edge I hadn't heard before. A man who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve the title. There was something almost dangerous in his tone, something that reminded me suddenly and forcefully of who these men were. The way the restaurant had fallen silent at Luca's entrance, the deference, or fear, in people's eyes. Jason made his choice, I said carefully. I've made peace with it. Antonio studied me for a long moment. Then his expression softened. Of course. Forgive an old man's temper. I just believe children should have fathers who honor their responsibilities. The rest of my shift passed uneventfully, but Antonio's words lingered in my mind. Family is everything. There had been something almost ritualistic in the way he'd said it, a mantra or code, rather than just a sentiment. As I left the hospital that evening, I found myself searching the street, half expecting to see Dominic or another of Luca's men watching. The street was ordinary, empty of intimidating SUVs or men in suits. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or disappointed. My phone buzzed as I reached my apartment building. Looking forward to tonight. The car will be there at 7:45. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could cancel. Should cancel, probably, but instead I typed, "See you then." I spent too long getting ready for dinner, trying on and discarding outfits, fussing with my hair, debating how much makeup was appropriate. I finally settled on a dark green wrap dress that flattered my figure while accommodating my small baby bump, which was becoming more noticeable each day. As promised, the car arrived precisely at 7:45. This time, Luca himself waited inside the SUV, the back door held open by Dominic. Emma. Luca's eyes traveled appreciatively over me as I slid into the seat beside him. You look beautiful. Thank you. I smoothed my dress nervously. You look nice too. An understatement. In a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, he was devastatingly handsome. How was your shift? He asked as the car pulled into traffic. Good. Your father is recovering well. They may discharge him tomorrow if his blood work continues to improve. Yes, Dr. Rossi mentioned that. He reached over and took my hand, his thumb tracing small circles on my skin. Thank you for taking such good care of him. The casual intimacy of his touch sent warmth up my arm. It's my job. It's more than that. His eyes met mine. You were kind to him. Patient. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. Where are we going tonight? Somewhere special. A small smile played at his lips. I hope you like Italian food beyond carbonara. The car took us to a quieter part of the city, stopping in front of a nondescript building with no sign, just a blue door and a small brass knocker. What is this place? I asked as Dominic opened my door. My home, Luca replied simply. I froze halfway out of the car. Your home? I thought we were going to a restaurant. I thought you might prefer privacy. He studied my expression. We can go elsewhere if you're uncomfortable. I hesitated. Going to his home felt like crossing a significant line, yet something in his steady gaze reassured me. No, it's fine. I was just surprised. He placed his hand at the small of my back, guiding me to the door, which opened before we reached it. A middle-aged woman with a warm smile greeted us in Italian. Emma, this is Rosa. She's been with my family since I was a boy. Welcome, Miss Emma, Rosa said, her accent thick but her smile genuine. Mr. Luca has been very excited for your visit. Luca cleared his throat, looking almost embarrassed. Rosa, please. She smiled knowingly and stepped aside to let us enter. The interior of Luca's home was surprisingly warm and inviting. Not the cold, modern mansion I had imagined. Rich woods, comfortable furniture, and art that looked like family heirlooms rather than status pieces. It felt lived in, personal. This isn't what I expected, I admitted as he led me through to a terrace overlooking a small but immaculate garden. What did you expect? He pulled out my chair at a table set for two, candlelight flickering in the early evening air. Something more intimidating, less homey. He smiled, taking his seat across from me. I save the intimidation for work. This is where I relax. Rosa appeared with antipasti and sparkling water for me, wine for Luca. I'll leave you to enjoy. The first course will be ready soon. As she disappeared back inside, Luca raised his glass. 2 unexpected meetings. I clinked my water glass against his wine. And mysterious dinner invitations. He smiled. Nothing mysterious tonight, just dinner at my home, cooked by Rosa, who has been threatening to quit if I don't start eating proper meals at a reasonable hour. The normalcy of the complaint, so at odds with my image of him, made me laugh. Long hours? Always. He selected an olive from the platter between us. Though lately I've found myself wanting to leave the office earlier because of your father's health, his eyes held mine. Because of you. The directness of his answer caught me off guard. Luca, I'm not pressuring you, Emma. I'm simply being honest about my interest. He broke a piece of bread, seemingly unbothered by my discomfort. Tell me about your plans for the baby. What do you need? Have you prepared a nursery? The abrupt change of subject gave me conversational whiplash. Not really. My apartment is small, so the baby will be in my room at first. I've started saving for a crib, but there's time. 16 weeks along now? I nodded, surprised he'd been tracking. Almost 17, actually. And you feel well? No complications? None so far. I studied him curiously. You know a lot about pregnancy. I've been reading, he admitted. After meeting you, I wanted to understand what you're experiencing. The thought of Luca Vidiello, imposing, powerful Luca, reading pregnancy books made something warm unfurl in my chest. That's unexpectedly sweet. I'm not always the intimidating figure you imagine, he said softly. Rosa returned with our first course, delicate homemade ravioli and a simple butter sage sauce. The pasta was perfect, melting on my tongue. This is incredible, I said after the first bite. Rosa is a miracle worker, Luca agreed. She's been trying to teach me to cook for years, but I'm a hopeless student. Really? I would have thought you'd excel at everything you attempt. He laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. Far from it. I can't cook, can't sing, and despite years of lessons, I play the piano like a particularly untalented child. I smiled at the self-deprecation. So the great Luca Vitiello has weaknesses after all. Many, he acknowledged, though I try not to advertise them. As dinner progressed through perfectly cooked branzino to a light lemon dessert, the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Luca told stories of growing up in his father's shadow, of his education in America, of his love for classical literature. I shared memories of my mother, my struggles through nursing school, my hopes for the future. By the time Rosa cleared the dessert plates, I felt relaxed, almost content, a feeling that should have alarmed me given the circumstances, but somehow didn't. Would you like a tour? Luca asked, standing and offering his hand. I hesitated only briefly before taking it. I'd like that. He led me through the house, pointing out artwork collected during his travels, books he particularly loved, a chess set that had belonged to his grandfather. On the second floor, he paused before a closed door. This was meant to be a music room, he said, pushing it open. Inside stood a grand piano, its lid closed, seemingly untouched. The room was otherwise empty. No other furniture, no decorations on the walls. I had ideas about filling it with music, Luca said, his voice quieter than usual. But as I mentioned, my talents lie elsewhere. I walked to the piano, drawn by memories of my own lessons as a child. May I? He nodded, watching as I lifted the lid and sat on the bench. I placed my fingers on the keys, playing a simple melody my mother had taught me. Nothing complicated, just a folk tune that brought back memories of simpler times. When I finished, I looked up to find Luca watching me with an expression of such naked longing that it stole my breath. That was beautiful, he said softly. Just a simple song. He moved closer, standing beside the bench. Would you play again? For me? I nodded, turning back to the keys, suddenly nervous under his intense gaze. I played another song my mother had loved, my fingers finding the notes from muscle memory. When I finished, Luca sat beside me on the bench, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him along my side. My mother played, he said quietly. Not well, by her own admission, but with passion. After she died, my father couldn't bear to hear music in the house. I didn't touch a piano again until I bought this one 5 years ago. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys. I thought I could reclaim something lost. But some things can't be recaptured through will alone. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. I placed my hand over his on the keys. I could teach you, if you wanted. He turned his hand to clasp mine, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. I would like that very much. For a breathless moment, we sat perfectly still, the air between us charged with something I wasn't ready to name. Then Luca lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles before releasing me. It's getting late, he said, standing. I should take you home. The abrupt shift left me disoriented. Oh, of course. As we descended the stairs, Luca's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. I need to take this. One moment. He stepped away, speaking rapid Italian in a low, controlled voice. Though I couldn't understand the words, I recognized the tone. The same commanding presence I'd witnessed before. A reminder of the other Luca. The one who silenced rooms with his presence. Who had men like Dominic following his orders without question. When he returned, his expression was carefully neutral. I apologize for the interruption. Is everything all right? I asked. Business, he said dismissively. Nothing for you to worry about. The deflection created a subtle barrier between us, a reminder of all he wasn't sharing. We drove to my apartment in relative silence, the easy conversation of dinner replaced by an awareness of all the questions that remained unasked. At my door, Luca paused. I'm leaving town tomorrow, business in Chicago. I'll be gone for 3 days. Oh. I tried to ignore the disappointment I felt. I hope it goes well. I'd like to see you when I return. Perhaps you could come back to the house for another piano lesson? His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. I nodded. I'd like that. He stepped closer, his hand rising to cut my cheek. This time when his lips met mine, it was no ghostly whisper. The kiss was gentle but deliberate, his lips warm and firm against mine. I found myself responding, my hands coming to rest lightly on his chest, feeling the solid strength of him beneath expensive fabric. When we broke apart, his eyes had darkened, his breathing slightly uneven. I should go. Yes, I agreed, though neither of us moved. He kissed me again, more urgently this time, his hand sliding into my hair. I melted against him, all my reservations temporarily forgotten in the heat of his touch. This time when he pulled away, he took a deliberate step back. Good night, Emma. Good night, Luca. I watched him walk to the waiting car, my body still humming with the memory of his kiss. Only after the SUV disappeared around the corner did I enter my apartment, touching my lips in wonder. My phone chimed as I closed the door. I'll call tomorrow. Sleep well, Bella. I smiled at the screen, typing back, Good night, Luca. As I got ready for bed, I tried to make sense of my feelings. In just a few days, Luca Vitiello had upended my carefully ordered world. There was still so much I didn't know about him. His business, his life, the power he wielded so effortlessly. Yet I found myself drawn to him in a way I couldn't explain. My hand drifted to my stomach, to the small but growing bump that represented my greatest responsibility. What do you think, little one? I whispered. Is your mom making a huge mistake? The baby fluttered in response, a tiny movement that might have been imagination, or might have been the first real communication from my child. Either way, I took it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't entirely wrong to follow this unexpected path. What I didn't know then was how quickly that path would darken, or how completely my life was about to change. The 3 days of Luca's absence crawled by with agonizing slowness. He called each evening as promised, our conversations stretching late into the night as we discussed everything from my day at work to his favorite childhood memories of Italy. He was careful not to mention his business in Chicago, and I was equally careful not to ask. Antonio was discharged from the hospital with strict instructions for follow-up care. instructions I suspected he would follow only because I had been the one to deliver them. The older Vitiello had developed a grandfatherly affection for me that was both touching and mildly unsettling. "You're good for my son," he told me the day he left the hospital. "He smiles when he speaks of you. Before you, I can't remember the last time I saw him truly smile." On the third evening, I received a text from Luca, "Returning tonight. Dinner tomorrow? I've missed you." The admission of missing me sent a ridiculous flutter through my chest. "I've missed you too. Dinner sounds perfect." That night, I dreamed of Luca. His hands, his eyes, his voice murmuring Italian words against my skin. I woke flushed and disoriented, my body humming with a need I hadn't felt in months. "This is insane," I told my reflection as I got ready for work. "You barely know him." But the truth was, our nightly conversations had created an intimacy that belied our short acquaintance. I knew how he took his coffee, that he preferred reading physical books to e-readers, that he'd broken his arm at 12 trying to climb a tree to rescue a neighbor's cat. He knew about my mother's battle with cancer, my favorite novels, my secret dream of someday opening a small clinic for underserved communities. We had shared pieces of ourselves, creating something that felt surprisingly real despite its unconventional beginning. My shift that day dragged endlessly. I found myself checking the clock every few minutes, anticipating the evening ahead. When I finally arrived home to prepare for dinner, a large box waited outside my apartment door. Inside was a dress, a simple but elegant navy blue maternity design that would perfectly accommodate my now obvious pregnancy. The note read simply, "If you like it. No pressure. L." I should have been offended at the presumption. Instead, I found myself touched by his thoughtfulness. The dress fit perfectly, the soft fabric draping gracefully over my bump while flattering the rest of my figure. At exactly 7 as a knock came at my door. When I opened it, Luca stood there. No Dominic, no SUV visible on the street. "You came alone," I observed, surprised. "I wanted tonight to be just us." His eyes traveled appreciatively over me in the dress. "You look beautiful. Thank you for the dress. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He held out his hand. "Shall we?" Instead of the sleek SUV, a less conspicuous luxury sedan waited at the curb. Luca opened my door himself before sliding into the driver's seat. "You drive?" I teased, occasionally when I want privacy. He glanced at me as we pulled away from the curb. "How are you feeling? Any fatigue? Discomfort?" "Just the usual. The baby's been active today." I placed a hand on my belly. Lots of movement. Something softened in Luca's expression. "May I?" he asked, his hand hovering over mine. I hesitated only briefly before guiding his hand to the spot where the baby had been kicking. We waited, his warm palm against my dress, until a definite thump pressed against his hand. The wonder that transformed his face made my heart twist. "That's incredible," he murmured. "It still amazes me every time," I admitted. He reluctantly withdrew his hand, returning it to the steering wheel, but his expression remained softened by the experience we'd shared. We drove to his home, where Rosa had prepared another exquisite meal. This time, we ate in a cozy dining room rather than on the terrace, candles creating a warm intimacy as we talked. Luca seemed more relaxed than before his trip, laughing more easily, touching my hand frequently across the table. After dinner, he led me back to the music room, where the piano waited, its lid already raised. "I believe I was promised a lesson," he said with a smile. I sat at the bench, patting the space beside me. It's never too late to learn. For the next hour, I guided his hands through simple scales and basic chords. Though he claimed to be hopeless, he was actually a decent student. His hands were strong and precise, his focus absolute. When he finally managed a simple melody, the pride in his expression was endearing. "You're a good teacher," he said, his shoulder warm against mine on the bench. "You're not as hopeless as you claimed," I countered. He turned to face me, our proximity suddenly charged with awareness. "Emma?" he said softly. "I want to be clear about something." My heart thudded in my chest. "What's that?" "These past days, talking to you, being with you, they've meant a great deal to me." His eyes held mine, serious and intense. I know our situation is unconventional. Your pregnancy, my lifestyle. But I find myself wanting to be part of your life, part of both your lives. I swallowed hard. Luca, there's still so much I don't know about you, your business, your world. Import-export primarily. My family has connections throughout Europe and Asia. It's complex, sometimes demanding, but legitimate. He took my hand. I know you have questions about the security, the way people respond to me. My family's reputation was built over generations, and yes, there are elements of my grandfather's and great-grandfather's businesses that operated in gray areas, but I've worked to legitimize everything. The careful phrasing wasn't lost on me. Are you trying to tell me you're from a Mafia family? He didn't flinch at the direct question. My heritage is complicated. The Mafia, as Americans understand it, is largely a Hollywood creation. But yes, my family has historical connections to certain organizations. I've spent my adult life moving us toward legitimate enterprises. I should have been shocked, should have pulled away. But somehow, the confirmation only put a name to what I had already sensed. And the men who follow you everywhere? Dominic, protection, old rivalries, business competitors. The world I operate in can be dangerous, but I've never involved myself in violence or illegal activities. He squeezed my hand. I wouldn't bring you into anything that would put you or your child at risk. And my job? The hospital donation. I saw someone I cared about struggling unnecessarily. I had the means to help. That's all. He lifted my hand to his lips. I won't apologize for that, but I understand if it bothers you. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. I don't know what to think, Luca. This is all so fast, so intense. I know. His thumb traced circles on my palm. I'm not asking for decisions tonight, just openness to possibilities. Before I could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it with a frown, then back to me apologetically. I need to take this. He stepped away, speaking in rapid Italian. Though I couldn't understand the words, I caught the tension in his posture, the sharp edge to his voice. When he returned, his expression was controlled, but I could see the strain around his eyes. I'm sorry, but I need to go out briefly. An issue at one of the warehouses requires my attention. At this hour? Unfortunately, yes. He hesitated. You're welcome to stay, to wait for me. I shouldn't be long. I should have asked to be taken home. Instead, I nodded. I'll wait. Relief flickered across his face. Rosa has retired for the evening, but please make yourself comfortable. There are books in the library, or you can watch something in the media room. He kissed me briefly, tension evident in the coiled restraint of his body, then left. I heard the front door close, followed by the sound of a car engine starting and fading into the distance. Alone in his home, I wandered from room to room, curiosity overcoming propriety. The library was impressive, walls lined with volumes in multiple languages. The kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances. A small office held a desk with a closed laptop and neatly organized papers. I was examining a photograph of a younger Luca with his father when I heard it, the front door opening, followed by voices. Relief washed over me. Luca had returned sooner than expected. But as I moved toward the foyer, I realized the voices weren't speaking Italian, but English, and neither belonged to Luca. Check upstairs. I'll take the main floor, a man's voice ordered. Fear froze me in place. Intruders. In Luca's home, where I was alone and pregnant. I backed away silently, looking frantically for a place to hide or a way to call for help. My phone was in my purse, in the music room. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept down the hallway, praying the floorboards wouldn't creak. I had almost reached the music room when a figure stepped into the hallway ahead of me. A man in dark clothes, gun drawn. Well, what do we have here? He said, his accent distinctly American. Vidiello's little girlfriend. I raised my hands instinctively, backing away. Please, I'm pregnant. Even better. He gestured with the gun. Rossi will be thrilled. 2 for the price of 1. My back hit the wall. What do you want? Insurance. Leverage. He smiled coldly. Your boyfriend's been causing problems for my employer. Now we have a solution. The sound of a door crashing open echoed through the house, followed by shouting and what might have been gunshots. The man's attention wavered for a split second, just long enough for me to lunge sideways into the nearest room, slamming the door and turning the lock. I found myself in a bathroom, windowless and small. I pressed my back against the door, heart pounding, hands protectively covering my belly. "Emma!" Luca's voice, urgent and frantic. "Emma, where are you?" "Luca," I called back, unlocking the door with trembling hands. He was there instantly, pulling me into his arms. Blood streaked his shirt. Not his own, I realized with horror. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands moving over me, checking for injuries. "No, I'm fine. The baby's fine." "What?" "We need to go, now." His expression was harder than I'd ever seen it, his eyes cold with a fury that transformed his handsome features into something dangerous. Over his shoulder, I glimpsed Dominic and another man dragging a body down the hallway. "Luca, what's happening?" My voice shook. "A rival organization. They followed me, waited until I left." His jaw clenched. "They won't make that mistake again." The cold certainty in his voice should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself leaning into his protection, allowing him to guide me through the house with his body shielding mine. Outside, multiple SUVs waited, men with guns standing guard. Luca helped me into one, sliding in beside me. "Take us to the safe house," he ordered the driver. As we pulled away, I saw police lights in the distance. "Luca, the police are being handled." His arm tightened around me. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I never wanted you exposed to this." I should have been horrified, should have demanded to be taken home, to be left out of whatever dangerous world he inhabited. Instead, I found myself asking, "What happens now?" He studied my face, searching for fear or rejection. "Now I keep you safe, both of you." His hand moved to cover my belly protectively. "If you'll let me." In that moment, with adrenaline still coursing through my veins, I made a choice that would forever alter the course of my life. I placed my hand over his. "I'll let you." The safe house turned out to be a penthouse apartment in a building Luca owned, with security that would have impressed the Pentagon. We stayed there for 3 days while Luca resolved the situation, a process I deliberately avoided asking about. On the 4th day, he came to me with a small velvet box and a question I hadn't expected so soon. "I know it's fast," he said, the ring glittering between us. "But life is uncertain, and I've wasted too much time already. I want to protect you, provide for you, be a father to your child. Let me give you both the family you deserve." I looked into his eyes that could be cold with authority or warm with tenderness, and saw my future reflected there, a life of luxury and danger, of passion and protection. Not the future I had planned, but one that called to something deep within me. "Yes," I said simply. 6 months later, I gave birth to a daughter, Sofia Lucia Vitiello, with my husband holding my hand and tears in his fierce blue eyes. "My family," he whispered, cradling our daughter with a gentleness that belied the power in his hands. "Everything that matters." As I watched him press a kiss to Sofia's forehead, I knew that dropping my purse that day had been the most fortunate accident of my life, the moment that led me not just to love, but to the protection, family, and belonging I had always sought. In Luca Vitiello, businessman, former Mafia heir, and devoted husband, I had found not just safety, but a passion and purpose I hadn't known I was missing. And in me, he had found the warmth and music his life had lacked for too long.